Thanks, Ben. Okay, we'll get things rolling.
Man, it took off on me.
Oh, geez, sorry. I am
It's all right.
going the wrong way.
Yeah, so the new submission system. Why are we doing it? There were data requirement changes. I mean, we had the next gen 911 requirements come in play as well. You know, the system the specification that we currently work with, or is we developed that back in 2013. So it's like 10 years old. There's already been deficiencies pointed out in that specification. We also needed to change the architecture of our system. So our system right now is kind of a combination. Part of it runs in FME, part of it runs in code. And so what we're going to just do is when we rebuild it, it'll all be, any of the routines that do testing will essentially be running using FME workspaces. So it'll be architecturally consistent, and then it will also meet the requirements of producing the needed formatted data. So that's kind of why we're doing it. And this is a good resource for you. Leanne spends some time, thanks to Leanne, and she does a great job of keeping our website up to date. And so if you go to our AMDSP.ca is the website for kind of, that's our administrative website, where it talks about who we are, what we do. There's a couple of sidebar menus that you're going to want to delve into. One is the NG 911 one that's just above the specifications. That'll give you some information on next gen 911. There's a fact page on there that we keep adding to. So as people bring up issues about next gen 911, when it's a kind of a common question that's raised, we'll try and add to our fact page so that everybody has access to that information. The specifications tab is really crucial for what's coming in the new system. So you click on the specifications, but you have to scroll down. What you're seeing here on the right-hand side is actually the bottom of that page. So you're going to scroll to the bottom of the page, and there you'll get the new specifications. I guess they're called new draft specifications for the time being. And you can download all of that, as well as the appendices. So a lot of what we're talking about today is either from the new specifications or from the appendices that are available to you. So there's a lot of resource of information there. And if you want to delve deeper into anything that's coming your way, you can read that in detail there. The only thing that we really don't have posted there is the RFP document. I produced an RFP document for basically for the requirements of what will be the new web-based web interface. And that's in an RFP document. And I suppose it probably should be reworked so that it's from the perspective of the user rather than the perspective of the vendor. But there's also good information in there as well. Okay. Yeah, so what's going to change based from the old system to the new system? So the input format is going to be altered somewhat. The overall mechanism for doing a submission and dealing with all that really doesn't change. You still submit shape files, you get shape files back. So at a high level, the process doesn't really change, but the format will be altered. The names of the actual submission files will be renamed, primarily just to make a distinction between have you got version 2 files or have you got version 3 files? So based on the names that you're getting, it'll be obvious as to what you're dealing with. If the idea is if you were to submit a version 2 file to the new system, you will get back version 3 files. You won't ever get back version 2 files, and hopefully at that point you go, okay, I've bit the bullet now. I've got to, I got to go the whole way and do this, because the system that does the actual migration from version 2 to version 3, there's ambiguity in how that takes place, primarily around house numbers, unit numbers, sometimes the civic address. So there's going to be some loose ends that you're going to have to straighten up. Another thing that's changing in the new system is we have the inclusion of a street name dictionary. The street name dictionary will ensure consistent street names in your data set. The file names change. There'll be additional tests that take place in the data. So we're adding to the rigorousness of what we're testing in our data sets. And you'll be compliant with NINA. So there's kind of a rough flow chart at the top there. This is kind of hard to read. There's still we're still planning to have the 2 streams for submission. One is the online web-based submission, and the other is the automated submission, as it were. They essentially become the same thing, because the online web submission will build you a control file, and then from the system's perspective, they become the same, as opposed to picking it up from the Dropbox and processing it. It goes through preliminary tests. Those preliminary tests are things like, are the files named correctly? Did you provide all the files that you're needing to provide? Are they consistent and proper map projection? Those kinds of rudimentary things. If it fails any one of those tests, you're going to get an email that says, you submitted this file. It's a different map projection than what the other files are in. Please correct this file. Steve?
Street name dictionary, is that something that the municipality would provide to you first? Is that, and then it would get tested against that?
We'll probably pre-populate a lot of the common street names for each member. So each member gets their own street name dictionary, or each municipality gets its own street name dictionary. So we'll probably pre-populate a table for you that has pretty obvious street names. But then if there's street names that are kind of outliers or new ones that get input over time, you'll be needing to add to your street name dictionary. We'll talk a little bit more down the road about with the street name dictionary thing. But it's every individual municipality has their own street name dictionary. Okay. And then the rest of the process is just, once it gets to the preliminary test, then it does all of the, the main tests that we apply against the data. It's more of the data testing. And then you get a result. You'll get an email like you do now, pass, fail, but we'll have a lot more detail in the emails that come back to you. Because the stuff that we got previously was a little cryptic in many cases. So we're trying to make it more transparent as to what the problem is. Okay. Okay, so one of the changes that we're making structurally is that currently when you submit your data, it's like this. So I just took the roads as an example. So the example on the left here, you have to submit all our fields. They don't all have to be populated, but you have to, that's the current system. You always have to have all of our fields all the time. And then the ones that you have to have populated have to be populated. So in the new system, because there's probably twice as many required field, or there's twice as many NINA fields as there were here. So the huge numbers of fields, many of which you'll never use. But so we're not going to make you, incorporate 60 fields into your data if most of them you never put any information in. So we have this required fields or conditional fields. They're listed mandatory or conditional. And so the mandatory fields, they have to be submitted. And they're gonna need to have some valid entries in there. So we're just basically requiring the bare minimum of what you have to submit. Conditional fields are, if this data applies to that given address or that given road, then yes, you must provide this information as well. Then the rest of it, you'll notice that address ranging is not currently in this list. So we're not forcing you to create an address range, but we are forcing you to designate the bottom one, it says validation left, validation right. So you mark validation left, validation right with a 0 or no, sorry, I guess it's N. So you mark the validation left, validation right with an N. All that means is that roads, the address range information on that road segment is not to be tested. So what's kind of a loophole we're using to get around the address ranging for the time being. Because people don't have it, they're not gonna have, there's no point validating it, it's all 0. So why validate it? So mark it no, and then if someone were to ever test the data, then if the test is being performed according to how we're reading the NEMA spec, is that it's just gonna say, yeah, the address ranges on this road segment don't get tested. And invariably, there's many address ranges on many road segments that would never be tested because there's never gonna be address. You know, like ramps or driveways, alleys.
Sorry, those two fields are just to say whether or not to validate those two fields from left and right.
Correct, yeah.
If you don't have data in there, you want to say no, but if the data is there.
Yes, then you can say yes, exactly. You could say, and if you have, like Airdrie does have, and many of the urban municipalities do have valid address ranges in their road network. So yeah, we might as well put yes, validate them, and then they're subject to scrutiny by not our process, but well, I suppose we could add a process that would also scrutinize the road ranges, or address ranges. Okay. So this is the conversion process to go from version 2 to version 3.
Sure, do you want to zoom in on that or?
No, I left it really small so you couldn't read it. It's very, but you can, this is in the document. I can't remember exactly which one. But we will make this publicly available. You will understand the rules of the game as to how we're going to take a crack at doing this conversion. But there are ambiguous situations where you're gonna get flagged, you're gonna get errors flagged out of it, and you're just gonna have to scrutinize those particular records, fix the information. Okay. So initial tests, yeah, these are currently all 7 of the initial tests. There's actually 8 tests. I think I combined them into one. The structure of the control file is correct. There's no folders inside the zip file. The files are named correctly. All the files that are required are submitted. They're all in the same map projection, and the map projection is a valid map projection. Mandatory fields and data types and field lengths are observed, and no multi-point or multi-line string shape files. So that's what we've got at present. That list can grow, and that's part of the design of the new system, is that made it abundantly clear to the developers that we potentially are going to be working with that this system has to be extensible. It has to be easily modifiable. So if we throw in another test for the pre-test, it's just test number 8. If we throw in a test in the validation test area, It's just another test. So right now we have, yeah, you can go to that. We have about, I think, 18 or 19 tests planned to be put into the system, many of which we already have, but there are some new tests that you can't read. So this is in Appendix C. So all these tests are detailed. There's not only just this is just a list of the tests, but there's actually a good document on what each test is and what is, there's detail about what it's looking at, and so on. So there's good information there that we really didn't have in our previous system.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, some of the tests on the additional value, like some of the ones like, one-ways, overpasses, just the value of some of that data that like might not have been populated, or just that default values, all of them, and or even number of lanes, and just making sure that that data is all validated as part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, you should go through these tests and look at them and see what we're looking for. Some of the tests that are highlighted in green are what we call, these are tests which we allow exceptions for. So example of that is a one-way road test. So the one-way road test is pretty straightforward. It looks for two roads which are marked as being one-way roads. They have the same name, but they go opposite directions and they meet each other head to head. So in the test says that's a bad thing. This is a one-way road, the same one-way road, and they come together and the cars smash into each other. That's bad. But in the case of, say, Red Deer, where they have a network where all intersections meet at a point, which is done in several municipalities. And it's one of the models that's used in certain dispatch centers systems. Then every one of those intersections is an opportunity for their cars don't literally drive that way through a common point in an intersection. It's just how they choose to represent that data. So this test in that case is useless. So, Steve has to put in exceptions for all his one-way roads. Whereas you may have a data set where the roads are depicted as, a crossing grid. The one-way roads north-south meeting the one-way roads going east-west, and there's a box that represents the intersection. And in a case like that, you shouldn't have one-way roads meeting another one-way road head-to-head. Many times, and this is maybe a point to note down, is that sometimes people will, so in the case of highways, you may have two roads that are considered the same road, and they meet head to head, but one is actually a ramp. You code the ramp as a ramp, it ignores the ramp. So you no longer have to have an exception for the one-way road rule if you use one as a ramp. So that's a way of, and because it's a nuisance to have exceptions, like these exception files, and maintain those. So that's one trick that you can use to deal with that issue. Let me look at, what's the next slide here? Yeah, that's a big one. Well, let's go back to that other, to see if there's some particular tests that we want to talk about.
Well, I think the one I'll just mention a few things that would come to mind when we were kind of laying out some of these new tests is that, just the application of routing and the application of emergency services just in application within their applications. And the importance of all those fields, like if you're not using them for any kind of routing or, you're not getting into like some of those more complex functions, the value of some of those items is quite a bit less. But when you do get into them, just making sure that those are populated, that they're maintained along with the rest of your data. Just in some cases, depending on the municipality, there's just a quick scan of the network and you can check it out and make sure quick fix a couple things and it's essentially validated. Some cases it is a lot more work, but just overpasses, just making sure that when you actually get into routing, because if any of that stuff's wrong, that whole area essentially is wrong, like. You can't route through, when you're driving through and you run into a bridge, so.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that, it's, you really gotta make sure that those things are in there, and I'm just, just speaking to the bar, everybody understands that, I'm sure, but it's just that. If it's not used locally and you aren't using it, sometimes that value statement isn't there, but. As a part of the NG program, that'll be important, because they won't, essentially those routes, nothing will work, so.
So one of the situations with routability and so on, it comes to mind is that overpasses. So one of the things that I think we made it an optional test. I can't remember exactly. But one of the things that we have the potential of checking for is if the road segment, which you label as an overpass, make sure that the overpass doesn't share a common vertex with the road that goes underneath it. And oftentimes they do. There's somehow those vertices, they've done, you've done some kind of cleaning process and it has introduced that intersection by creating vertices in the overpass and in the road underneath it, which don't actually connect to one another from a routing perspective or in reality. So one of the tests will be that to flag that you have common vertices between an overpass and a road that goes under it. And so you want to remove those. And I can't remember if that test is optional or not. Another one is a test, and this will be quite an involved test. And I believe this is an optional test as well, but it's more for the rural people, where they'll have a rural address off. Some could be miles and miles away from the road that they actually are addressed from. So there might be lengthy driveways, there might, one of the worst cases of this is in Brazeau County. They have they're in the green area of the province, they have miles and miles and miles they literally have a grid of roads. They look like grid roads, they look like, township and range roads. Off in the forest areas for 10, 20, 30 miles back. None of them are public roads. They don't consider any of them public roads. They're all, from the county's perspective, these are private resource roads. And yet they fall on, statutory road lines. So they've got some address for a gas plant, 10 miles away from the highway. And it's somehow addressed off of the highway. That's the nearest public road. And the address for that point it's far, far away. So our test will go the way it's supposed to work, goes to that address. It says, okay, this is my address. I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Highway 21. And then it goes, what's nearest to me? Is there a Highway 21? If I try to bump into a road that's I'm adjacent to? No, they're all private roads. Okay. So then it starts and goes, grabs the private road, connects to so it's going to build topology for all the private roads. And then topologically and eliminate any of the public roads. Then when it introduces the public roads, is this address says it connects to Highway 21. Do any of the private roads that I'm adjacent or networked to, not just a straight line, but networked through the network? Does one of the ends of one of those networks, of that network, touch Highway 21? And if it's yes, then good. And if it doesn't touch, if none of the network roads that are accessible by that address actually touch a Highway 21, it'll flag it, say, well, this is addressed off Highway 21, but it never actually gets to Highway 21. So you have a potential issue.
But then you need a network of private roads, which, for example, we don't have.
Yeah, and so you're gonna be, in that case, you'll be only using the test that's testing on proximity. So purely on
But it
proximity.
will still be flagged, but because it could be, another road could be closer by.
It could,
Yeah,
yeah,
so then
So
you
you-
get flagged basically.
you'll get an error, a flag in error that, yeah.
And if you accept those errors, or-
You can make an exception to that because it's an ambiguous test.
We have sort of similar problems in country, but like, addresses that were originally assigned to undivided land, and then as subdivisions occur, the remaining parcel, the remaining point gets nudged further and further to the parcel. In the end, that the road it was originally addressed off of might be far away from it, so on occasion we have that sort of situation.
Yeah.
So we would also sort of just go through the errors and accept that as an exception.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these particular tests have to have exceptions because there are truly, literally exceptions to the rule. And they exist. So you'll be, in some cases, you simply, I think in the case of that very convoluted test that I talked about, you simply don't have to run it. So you don't have, by virtue of the fact that you're not running the test, you don't need the exception. Whereas I think the other test where it just looks at proximity, you'll have to create an exception record. Yeah. Okay. How are we doing for time? Good, okay. Name street name format and addresses. So this is taken right out of our, I think it's Appendix C. You're gonna download them both anyway, so it doesn't matter. One of the appendixes is a spreadsheet, and it has a whole bunch of tabs of pages in the spreadsheet. It's got the schemas for the roads, it's got the schema for the addresses, and then it's got a whole bunch of examples and a whole bunch of other tertiary data. There's lookup tables in there and all kinds of good information. So, but this is a key thing about, currently in our existing system, you have 3 potential formats that you could use to submit your road names, your street names. So there's the name field, there's the road under our name field, and then there's all these parsed fields that we allow as well. In the new submission system, there'll be 1. We will only have our AMDSP road street name field. Period. That's the only thing you submit. How you get all of these other parsed values is your street name dictionary. So you have a street name dictionary entry that's Tyler Nelson Way. And it'll break down, put Tyler Nelson into the main name field, it'll put way as the road type. But that's defined in your dictionary. So every time you have an instance of Tyler Nelson Way, it's gonna parse that 100% the same way in your data set. As well, it also allows you to break that out and define it. And it also adds, yeah, that's pretty well it. But then these other fields come into play as to how the actual address will get parsed out. One of the things you cannot see in this terrible screen is that the house number in Nina is a number. And stop, hard stop. So your house numbers have to be numeric. So they do allow a alpha prefix and an alpha suffix. So in the case of, your A and B, A's and B's, and these are representing different buildings. Okay, so if you're dealing with a rural address situation where you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 A and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 B. The A and the B can go in the suffix field and the address data. But it has to be stored out, because it's the only way you can store it. You can only store it on the numeric field. So that's going to be a difference. Where we get into these roads, these rural roads that have numeric prefixes. They've actually called the road, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Range Road 121. That's gonna have to work itself into the actual road name, I guess, depending on how they look at it. This is a aberration that was primarily caused by TELUS. Because TELUS's system for storing their road names couldn't accommodate any more than 5 digits in an address. It's their addressing database couldn't store more than 5 digits. So in order to accommodate the 6-digit address numbers that are used in many of the rural municipalities, they had to force that into the road name field. It was a workaround. And then it got kind of adopted as well. Let's just call our roads that. So then what are the house numbers? Because the house numbers they're not the house number anymore. They're like a building number. And so right in our current system, people are putting those numbers in many cases into the unit field. And so you're going to be discouraged from putting much information at all in the unit field, because the unit in an address is now a sub unit within a particular building. The NINA format is it's well defined, and the AHS really wants this clarified. They want to strictly enforce the use of the unit field, because from their perspective, a unit is just like an apartment within a particular building, subunit within a building. So we'll have checks and balances or checks in place to make sure that you don't have tons and tons of units.
Like the apartments building their community.
Pardon me?
So, large apartment building, the unit numbers.
Unit numbers can be a unit in an
Okay.
apartment, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah. And unit numbers can even be a unit in a Bearline condo.
Yeah.
Because many times they consider that a unit. So it is ambiguous. But what they don't want is, like in a rural subdivision, where you might have 20 houses or 200 houses, and those are all units, because they're not units, they're just houses.
Right.
But in the new format, we have a field which you can't read, which is called building. So we actually have a finer breakdown. So we have house address, prefix, suffix, building, unit. So you have a much finer breakdown, and this is one of the areas where we won't be able to, when we do this automated conversion, we're not going to be able to sort this stuff out. I mean, we'll take our best guess, but it's going to be a guess. So you'll have to fix up the data once it's gone through its initial process. Okay, yeah, this is just to talk a little bit about the street name dictionary. So it'll be rigorously the street name dictionary that each of you will have for each municipality, or in the case of, like Palliser here, where you're dealing with 30 municipalities, there'll be 30 distinct street name dictionaries. Each municipality will have its own street name dictionary. And that should contain all the names for all the streets and all of the addresses that have street names, which is all of them, in that particular municipality.
So does each municipality update their own dictionary if there's going to be a street name change or an additional street?
Yeah. I mean, whoever's doing the data submission, this is going to be part of what they're going to have to deal with is if there's a new street name, at a bare minimum, they're going to have to go in. The system will try and insert a record. Say, we've never seen 27th Street before in, this town. So 27th Street is a pretty identifiable street name. It's a number followed by something that's reasonable, like street. It'll throw it into the street name dictionary. And then the user will have to go in, log in, go to their street name dictionary review screen, and the user can mark that they've accepted that street name and that it's being parsed correctly. They choose the parsing of that particular street name. They accept it, but then it also has to be accepted by the system administrator, yours truly. And once they've had this two-step validation or acceptance, then that's an accepted street name. So this is to stop people from putting in, it's like, I'm having trouble with this data. It won't take this road name, so I'm just gonna put it in and accept it. You know, and the street name is, this is the road that I take when I want to go to the power plant and do some fishing growth. No, that's not a valid street name. But we do have street names like that in our current data set, which AHS hates, and probably many others. And so we're trying to clean our act up, as it were. So that's the effort is, and as well, you know, there'll be pick lists for certain fields, like there'll be pick lists for the street type and that sort of thing. There's actually, interestingly enough, in the NINA format, the current NINA standard is something like 450. Like we have 145 street types in Alberta. I thought that was enough. No, there's 450 of them in the NINA standard. But they're missing 20 of our most common, one of our, in many cases, commonly used street types. There is no range road in NINA. So I've put in a request to NINA, please add range road for all of Western Canada. It gets used a lot. And then there's a bunch of others that we just need to add because Albertans are so creative. Yeah, so then this whole thing of the street name dictionary, there's not always, not in addition to there's being this rigorousness of what has to be done, but it will also reflect in some new status values in your grid. And I can't remember exactly what the status value is, but there will be a status indicating that you've submitted a street name that hasn't been accepted yet. So you won't be able to get a successful submission until that's all been checked off. But there'll be an indication in the status of your grid of submission that indicates that.
And an email sent to Dawn to approve it.
Something like that. There'll actually be I'll get a combined list of all the street names that I have to go through on a daily basis, so I can check off the street names for 20 different municipalities that are waiting on things all in one go. Output files, that pretty much be the private output files that you get back are kind of similar to what you get now, with the exception that you still get your error files, exception files, and submission files. But the system will, remember what we talked about, how you're only having to put in a limited number of fields to actually do a submission. But the system will actually add all fields on the data you get back. Now, whether you choose to use that file for resubmission, or you just work with, you know, generate or work with your own data and send it in again, it doesn't matter. But at least you'll have all the fields in the data that you get back. And some people they literally just work with, you know, they're always just sending it in, getting it back, sending it in, getting it back. That is their data set. So for them, they're always going to be working with all the fields. The public distribution data will only have the NINA fields and the AMDSP fields that are public. Well, there's one field and it says no secure data. So we have this new feature coming in the new system where we can identify addresses as secure addresses. Is there's, a couple of municipalities where they have secret addresses that they only share with, like AHS, but they don't want that shared with any other entity. So we will respect that. So they'll be able to put all their data in, AHS will have access to it, but nobody, like, the public won't. So those records will get stripped out of the addresses. And all of your private fields that if you so choose to submit. So say you've got a road network and you've got pavement date. And that's something you just have in your data set. You don't want to bother to strip it out. You just want to just send in your master data. Then you can do that, but the public data won't have that field. It'll only have our published. These are the NINA fields, these are AMDSP fields. That's all that goes into the public data. Then you'll have a third data set called the NINA formatted data. And again, these will be available to you in the grid, the download grid, what you now have as a review grid of all your submissions. So you'll have 3 buttons or 3 labels for 3 data sets. You'll be able to get your submitted data, the public data, and the NINA data. The NINA data will just be only the NINA fields, but it'll include the secure data. And it'll be put into, it's actually going to go into a file view database and be zipped up because it's the NINA format. There's, it gets turned into parent-child tables for particular, when you have road synonym road names, there's this parent-child relationship that gets established. So we'll be using the published NINA template of the data will get populated. And that'll be available to you, and you'll have the latest and greatest NINA formatted data. What you do with it is your business. So. And a user dashboard. So this is another enhancement to the system. So we haven't fully designed or defined what is going to be on this dashboard, but it'll be relevant information to the user, to the member. So it'll tell them things like stats on how many downloads have been on their data, or notice that they have an overdue submission. So it's been 19 months since you guys last uploaded. There'll be a big red something. Please resubmit your data. Number of downloads for the data. Oh, sorry, the upload stats would be the upload. It's the hurrah. You know, you submitted your data 27 times this year. You get a gold star. Keep going. And then tickets requiring attention. So if they have, if through the ticketing system, if people have sent in tickets saying you've got a missing address, you've got an incorrect road name, you know, whatever the public or the emergency community might find in your data set that's deficient, you'll get a ticket. As in a ticket that you have to respond to. So this will notify you've got tickets outstanding and then notices of failure that you have to take care of. So that'll kind of be on the dashboard.
I would probably add too that these are things that we'll have to monitor as part of being a bit of an aggregator, mid-level, mid-tier, I don't know what the definition they're using now, but as part of a mid-tier aggregator, there will be a requirement to monitor some of these things like the time required for attention to tickets, like how long it's taking to turn around tickets, things like that, that we'll have to try to provide back to our membership as well as to the NG program, because there are standards that are being set within the program on what kind of turnarounds. Now, it could be argued like what they have right now might not be realistic. That's fair, but we'll still have to monitor those stats so that we can provide feedback as far as our process goes that says, hey, you know, we're meeting all these requirements. Like, you know, here's our turnaround times, you know, here's what we're getting, here's how many tickets we're getting. We'll have to monitor those stats as we go forward. So
Yeah, it's, you know, there'll be administrative monitoring of tickets.
And that, yeah, if somebody submitted a ticket that said you're missing an address, so if AHS, for example. You know, somebody really credible submits a ticket, says, you know. We couldn't get to this address because it's not in your data. That's you know, pretty serious, and if that goes unanswered for. You know, 5 days or something, it's like, I'm gonna be phoning. Whoever it should be that's fixing that. And like, you realize you have a ticket and you need to get this fixed. So there'll be more than just a. Red blurb on the screen, there'll be phone calls coming your way.
There's a question here that came from the county of Wetaskiwin for Catalyst. Unisite customers, will municipality be maintaining or monitoring the tickets, or will Catalyst? So comes down to
Good.
whose
question.
role, whose responsibility, and that'll have to be identified as we go forward. And
Probably it's gonna be a multiple of. There could potentially be multiple people that get the notification of the ticket. But generally speaking. It's the contact that we have on the account that was used for the. For the submission is gonna get the ticket.
And most likely onus will be on the municipality from the conversations we've had, that even if the ticket's sent to, you know, your provider, your vendor, that, you know, this needs to be corrected and you get it as well, you know, it'll be an initiative. You'll have a responsibility to follow up from both parties to ensure it's repaired in a timely manner, especially if, you know, if the requirement to update it is local knowledge from the municipality, there'll be a need to get involved in that, not just, you know what I mean? Like the vendor itself may not be able to solve it. And so the obligation or the responsibility would be the municipality to update the data.
Yeah. Good, thanks for watching that.
Quick question. So if you're contacting a municipality and then they're responding back to it and saying, okay, this thing's fine. So you guys gonna track the history of the conversation or a way for the municipality to upload comments back to the system?
There'll be a chain, yeah, there'll be a chain of. Correspondence through the ticket.
Yeah.
You know, could be somebody submits a ticket, says. We couldn't find address, you know, 123 Green Street. It's missing in your data. And then, so the municipality gets back and then says, well, sorry, but there is no 123 Green Street in our municipality. There's a 125 Green Street and you can see that it's right there. And you can include, you know, things like images or links to maps and so on. Maybe the person that submitted the ticket is like, oh, yes, I meant 12, whatever, you know, the case may be. There can be a back and forth in that.
So like a login portal or something?
It'll be part of, so a member will have access to the tickets for their municipality to respond. And there'll be a public portal for the submission of tickets that the public uses or other entities. Yeah.
And again, this is one of the requirements of the NG program that we have a feedback and a timely feedback, not just a feedback, but timely feedback loop that meets those standards that they're aiming for in turnaround time. So it's part of the bigger.
This was an attempt to kind of have a mechanism to meet the requirement that's in the LGA agreement that talks about the 72-hour, which is, I don't know.
Some of those numbers we have to, that's that advocacy piece again. We have to advocate on behalf of the membership and make sure that these things are reality for us. You know, the discussion around development, how long it takes to get a just even to develop addresses, right? And things that we know happen within our organizations that we need to make sure we're communicating that, and there'll be a point for that. And we're not quite sure where that is yet, but as we get a little closer to that time, I'm sure there'll be quite detailed conversations around what's reality in adequate turnaround times, eh?
Quick question, how do you know if you have a ticket except for having to log into the system daily?
You'll get an email notification. The person that's responsible for, and we haven't worked out the exact details, how, you know, where the ticket notifications are going to be sent, but it's going to be email. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, otherwise you'd be having, it's like, am I gonna log in every day and see if I've got any tickets? It's like, no. No. Yeah, Steve?
When you anticipate version 3 is gonna be a go.
So, our initial hope was to have it done end of first quarter next year. But, the selection of a vendor has taken a lot longer than we had anticipated. I'm hoping that we're pretty close to actually being able to select a vendor and get things rolling. But it has dragged on for quite a length of time.
Do you have a quick list of the changes that were made to the standard as a part of making sure that it meets MENA requirements? I'm just looking for, this is what we used to do. Let me just hear, these are the extra things that have been added.
I don't know that I have a distinct list. I think there's a lot of verbiage that's ink been spilled on it. I think if you look through the next gen 911, the NG 911 fact pages, there's information there, as well as there's just some general information on that NG 911 page, but I haven't actually compiled a distinct list of changes, I don't think.
You kind of did in your slides when you highlighted those fields. But I know like for address changes, ours is permit driven. So if there was a complaint about an address and we have to make a permit and then start the process to change it, and that will take a lot longer than the 72 hours.
Yeah. Well, and your response is, we've created, this process has been started, and it becomes part of your workflow, as it were.
Part of it might be the discussion around like an inquiry versus a change. Just because some of them might just be like, Don, you have a good example. It's like, might be an inquiry where somebody's made a mistake, and we get once in a while where we'll have the public call us and say, this took forever to get the ambulance to my house, and then we'll do a full inquiry with AHS, find out what happened, what went on. There's so many things play into those conversations. So many variables occur. And there's no perfect, like, as far as like, you drive up like in a digital world, like there's so many variables play into those conversations about, the caller, all these things play into how they get there. And so you got to follow up the whole thing. And then these processes take a bit of time, right?
Could be a missing address in the data set, could be a typo in the data set. I was literally like talking to one of the summer villages the other day, and as I was talking to them, I was looking at their map that I prepared. And I realized, because I color code all of the address points based upon their street name. So you can kind of see outliers that way quickly, visually. And I was looking at it, it's like, wait a minute. All the addresses on 5th Street are the same color as all the addresses on 6th Street. Well, that's not right. Oh, there is no 6th Street. They're all been coded 5th Street. Somebody had put all the addresses in, made them all 5th Street. And because there were no duplicated numbers, they were kicked out by our system. So yeah, things like that. So yeah, errors, we're always chasing errors, right? Yeah, so, and that's a good use of the ticketing, that sort of thing, to correct errors or missing data.
I might just add one more thing too, is that, again, go back to what we talked about before. We are a partnership about data. We're about data. So when we go to any of these efforts that we go to talk about standards for applying addresses, we talk about all the exceptions that may be out there to deal with situations that create considerable cost to people, and all those exceptions and scenarios will, they all exist. And so we're about the data itself that it takes to represent your municipality in all of these systems, right? So if you choose as a municipality to say that 123 Green Street,
yeah,
and there's no Green Street, and you choose not to have that orientate that a road that's called Green Street in front of that place, or go to that place in anywhere in the municipality, then you'll make that exception, and that's part of your local addressing. Your local addressing portfolio, right? But at the end of the day, we're only gonna submit, we're gonna pass the tests that are required for the tools that NG requires. So if they require a name or an address or not, maybe not allowing you to put unknown in there, which we have quite a few in. You know, these are the things we're gonna be trying to clean up in the data sets that we don't have. Because they do create challenges in using the data when an entire municipality's got all their names, their roads is unknown.
And there are many valid cases where, addresses are created against streets that don't exist in the municipality because the street that they're accessed from is in a different municipality. That happens all the time. So that's a case where that's just true. It's the way it is. Constantine, is Roberta Purnell still around? Yeah. Well, you can go back to Roberta and give her just a big, happy present. That we are creating a notification system, and she asked for it years and years ago. This is part of the system, is to, similar to the dashboard, it's gonna notify the user on some basis, maybe quarterly, and just give them an update. So they won't even have to log in, or they don't want to get the notifications, they can unsubscribe and just not get them. But it's there to just provide information to the municipality. So let's just quickly, okay,
Hopefully help validate some of your effort. When you're working at doing this effort on a regular basis and your council asks you, or you have to put more time into it. You know,
okay. Ticketing system, yeah, we pretty much exhausted the ticketing system. The other aspect of the ticketing system that we didn't talk about was that the design of the ticketing system is to be two-way. So it will allow data users to notify the data originator of a problem in the data. It will also, the intention is that it will allow the data creator, municipality, to notify the data users, particularly like AHS, the PSAPs, the emergency response agencies that actually are supposedly using the information. That's something, there's been a change. So for example, if an address was created that was a wrong address, it was a nonsensical address, or it was just wrong. And so that, once that data gets into our data set, sits around for a while, it's going to get consumed. And so say that address was sitting there for a year. Well, AHS probably has that data in their system already. And you come along and say, wait a minute, that address is garbage. It should never have been assigned. You can then create a ticket rather, that goes to them. Say, please remove this address from your system. It was created in error. So that's the intention, whether it works or not. I mean, whether the the issue becomes, will the agency that has that data do anything about it?
part of our communications as we reach out to the PSAPs to open those doors of communication and talk about that could add value to them, eh?
But that's the intention. Then we talk about road address ranges already. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that in the wrap up. And questions, you guys have been really good. Any other questions?
Oh, great.
Could you expand on
Sorry about that.
on address? Our shape file head field header restrictions reconcile with the larger field name headers. The 10-character limitation of field names? Yeah, all the fields are less than 10 or less characters. In our spec and in Nina. They have I don't know if that's what they were getting at.
That's probably what you're at. That's probably is the answer that's being asked, is that, how is it?
Yeah, the actual physical field name. There's a physical field, so if you look in the table, this appendix C, I believe.
it's got the logical field name, which is a kind of a descriptive field name. And then it's got the physical field name, which is some cryptic, you know, less than 11 character alpha, like, you know, field name.
Yeah, Jason just said yes, so that's the answer, yeah. That's
Okay,
what he's asking, yeah.
all right,
Okay.
good. That's it for me. For now. So if you have any questions, feel free to approach. We're gonna have coffee.
Yeah.
And a few cookies or something. Coffee, you gotta walk all the way from the coffee to the cookies, that's.
All right.